Well, welcome back to In the Word. Great week looking ahead here that we have before us. We'll be in chapter 32 today of Isaiah, and then chapter 33 tomorrow and 34 on Friday. Had to look at my notes here. So we'll looking forward to continuing in this section of Isaiah that's called the Book of Judgment. It goes to chapter 35. Then 36 through 39 is the book of Hezekiah. So it's interesting, we have this prophetic section, book of judgment. Then we have a historic section, the book of Hezekiah. And then finally the book of consolation, chapters 40 to 66. Before I go on in chapter 32 today, let me first say how grateful I am for you who support this ministry through prayer and through your financial giving. At the end of the month, I always get a kind of a surge of financial giving, so I appreciate your faithfulness and how you enable me to continue to pay for the expenses associated with the ministry, as giving me resources to travel to various speaking engagements that come up from time to time and to take advantage of them. So I appreciate that, and we're partnering together in this effort to educate and edify and equip God's people. So may God bless you in that effort, and may you be storing up for yourselves rewards in heaven, even as we labor together on earth. So let's take a look again. We're in chapter 32 of Isaiah. This is the ultimate victory. This is another one of those instances that I pointed out in the Bible where it's unfortunate we have a chapter break, because chapters 31 and 32 just really flow one into another. Chapter 31 was those who are kind of a woe oracle, those who are trusting in Egypt and not God. Posed the question for us, do we trust in man or God? Here we see the ultimate fruit of trusting in God, which is victory, the Messiah's victory, and that's what we see in chapter 32. I've divided this into two major sections. Verses 1 through 8 is the Messiah's victory. Verses 9 through 14 are a period of chaos, which precedes 15 to the end of the chapter, where God's Spirit is poured out on Israel. So again, first, Messiah's victory is declared. We see that in verses 1 through 8. Behold, a king will reign in righteousness, and princes will rule in judgment. Each will be like a hiding place from the wind, a shelter for the storm. So this is an announcement that's being made. Behold, look, check this out. Speaking to this, I think, remnant of Israel, looking forward to an ultimate victory, a victory that's going to come after 701, after, I think, the conquests in 605 and 597 and even 586. This is the ultimate victory of the Messiah that's promised here. Compare this to Psalm chapter 2, for example, Psalm 2. We see some stages or some aspects of the Messiah's victory. Verses 1 to 2 talk about refreshing. Each of these leaders will be like a hiding place from the wind, a shelter from the storm, like streams of water in a dry place, like the shade of a great rock in a weary land. So we see this, they're going to be a place of refreshment. Here in Colorado, we live in the mountains, and sometimes it gets extremely windy where I live, and it's good to get out of the wind. It's refreshing in that you get out of the bite of a wind on a cool day, and you immediately warm up, and that's what the idea here is. They'll be sheltered, they'll be protected from that biting wind that they've been subjected to. In immediate view, of course, is the biting wind of the Assyrian invasion, and then later the Babylonian invasions. But ultimately, this is looking forward to the coming of the Messiah. We see not only refreshment in verses 1 to 2, but restoration in verses 3 through 4. Then the eyes of those who see will not be closed, and the ears of those who hear will give attention. The heart of the hasty will understand and know, and the tongue of the stammerers will hasten and speak distinctly. So Isaiah has been preaching and teaching and executing his prophetic ministry among people who are blind and deaf, who refuse to see. They may be witnesses to what the Lord is doing, but they lack spiritual insight and understanding. And here we see that they're going to be restored to full understanding, that Israel will be able to see and hear and understand what the Messiah is doing. Verses then 5 to 8 is a reversal. So we see a refreshment, a restoration, and now a reversal. The fool will no more be called noble, nor the scoundrel said to be honorable. And again, this is a prophecy about a theme that we see in the prophets frequently about leaders who are foolish and honorable men who are really scoundrels. That's part of God's curse, is to have leaders that are inept, impotent, unable, and that's part of God's curse. The fool speaks folly, and his heart is busy with iniquity, to practice ungodliness, to utter error concerning the Lord, to leave the craving of the hungry unsatisfied, and to deprive the thirsty of drink. So here we have this fool speaks folly, perhaps speaking of false prophets, false teachers that were present in Israel. They have a message, but a message that is not satisfying. They have words to speak, but words that don't provide any edification or any equipping to God's people. And that'll be reversed. As for the scoundrel, his devices are evil. He plans wicked schemes to ruin the poor with lying words, even when the plea of the needy is right. But he who is noble plans noble things, and on noble things he stands. So again, a great reversal here. The fool, the scoundrel, will be revealed for what he is, and then the noble man, the man who is truly noble, he will stand on the plans that he makes, plans and no doubt in accordance with God's will. We often see in the prophets, though, this coming of the Messiah is preceded by a period of desolation, a period of chaos, a period of judgment. Rise up, you women who are at ease. Hear my voice, you complacent daughters. Give ear to my speech. In a little more than a year, you will shudder with you complacent women. For the grape harvest fails, and the fruit harvest will not come. Tremble, you women who are at ease. Shudder, you complacent ones. Strip and make yourselves bare, and tie sackcloth around your waist. This is a promise of coming chaos. I think he's speaking here to literal women, but I think he's also addressing effeminate qualities present in Israel, that they are going to be as weak as women would be in battle, and would be taken advantage of just as badly. Again, this idea of desolation, this idea of weakness, we see it in Isaiah, but also in Jeremiah. We see it in Ezekiel chapter 37, where we see a great war comes before the restoration. The palace is forsaken in verse 14, the populous city deserted. The hill and the watchtower will become dens forever, a joy of wild donkeys and pastures of flocks. So these great lands are going to be totally thrust into devastation. But God's Spirit will be poured out. God's intervention will cause this to be reversed. Look at verse 15. How long will this go on? Until the Spirit is poured out upon us from on high, and the wilderness becomes a fruitful field. Again, recalling the promise of the coming Messiah, this is now anticipating the promise of Jeremiah 31, the new covenant, that God's people will in fact be restored physically. they'll be restored spiritually as well. And that's what we see in these final verses. Justice will dwell in the wilderness, righteousness abide in the field. So again, alluding to this coming king, this coming Messiah who will be enthroned, who will reign and rule, and the righteous will be vindicated, and the remnant will be redeemed. So, how can we apply this to ourselves? What does this mean to us today? Well, we know that Jesus is that coming Messiah. It's proven over and over again throughout the New Testament. It's affirmed by the apostles, and we see it, him coming in the book of Revelation. So Jesus ultimately is the victory, and his victory is certain. So we can rest in that, and we can rest in knowing that the remnant shall be preserved in chaos. That as we go through the world as Israel did, as they experienced judgment on the world, as we are witnessing around us, that the remnant, us, will be preserved, that we have eyes to see, that we have ears to hear, that we today have the Spirit, a down payment for our full redemption, who is illuminating our mind and allowing us to see these lessons that the people of Israel missed, that we can learn from their mistake, and we can learn the spiritual lessons that God is bringing through his judgment on the earth. Could also be assured that the Spirit is going to be poured out on Israel, and even now that the church, in the future when that Spirit comes to Israel, the church will reign with Christ. We hear that over and over again in the book of Revelation. Not only is the Messiah coming, not only is the Messiah going to restore his people, but he is bringing the church with him, and the church will reign and rule with the Messiah in this coming kingdom that's promised to us. Take heart, brothers and sisters. The Lord is coming. God bless you.